All right. Today guest is Byron Hackett. Byron's a sports reporter in Red Deer for the Red Deer Advocate. So welcome to the show and thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Blair. I don't have the fancy bookshelf that a lot of those guys have at their house with all the big books on it, but we'll make do.
Couple nice little plants on the windowsill though.
Yeah, I got some bean plants growing in little pots there, and then a nice plant my dad gave my sister for her birthday in 2010, and I took it home from Ontario at Christmas, so got her growing. It's a
Oh,
pretty big
nice. That's
accomplishment
pretty
for
cool.
me. Yeah.
Is that what you've been doing during quarantine?
Yeah, I'm a green thumb now. I can grow anything.
Right on. Okay, well, we'll get into it here. Just kind of talk about your experience, what's led you to Red Deer.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've been doing this now for almost 6 years, which seems crazy to me. But I think like it started a long time. It started when I was a kid. I remember my dad putting articles in the local paper about our Pee Wee team or whatever age I was, and he would just kind of write who scored the goals and a little thing in there. And I remember it being so cool seeing that in the paper, and then once I finished university, I started blogging and writing about the Blue Jays and some of their prospects and stuff like that, and found I had a passion for it, and people really liked the way I write. And so I went to school for that just for a year, and then I interned at the Hockey News for 3 months and wrote some things in there that got me a job in Melfort, Saskatchewan. Covered the Mustangs a little bit, and I did that for 8 months, and then got a job in Fort St. John, BC, up in northern BC, working at a daily paper there. So the paper I started at was once a week, so it wasn't too busy. And then when I moved to Fort St. John, it was every day we published. So I had to lay out the stories and how they look in the paper and write them every day. So it was just, a lot more work and a lot more like trying to find stuff to write about every day, because it was a small community, but it was a pretty big sports community and lots going on. So
Yeah.
then from there, I got the job here. The job here, two guys had been doing it for 30 years, and then they both retired within the same 6-month period. So they wanted to get one person in to do the job with two guys. So I was able to fill the void a little bit, I guess, and I've been here for 3.5 years now, which again seems crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing the same stuff there, like just reporting on like the local sports community.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I cover everything from minor hockey, like Bantam AAA, all the way up to the Rebels, and I've covered some NHL stuff, but obviously it doesn't happen here that often. We've had a couple of those rookie games here the last 2 years, so those have been fun to cover too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Right on. And what did you go to university for originally?
So I have a degree in English language and literature from BAC University in St. Catharines, Ontario,
Okay.
and then I have a post grad diploma in sports journalism. So that was just a 1-year program. That was a lot of radio and TV focused. Like that's kind of what our main thing was. But I was always interested in the writing, so I just did a lot of it and got a lot of feedback from my teachers there.
Yeah. So when you're going through, I guess the process to work in media, does there come a point where like you have to make the decision to go through the journalist route or TV radio route?
Yeah, for sure. I think you can do all of them. Like everyone, I think who is in media probably thinks they're capable of doing certain
Yeah.
things, but I think you just you have a knack for one or the other, and then some people have the personality and they're able to do the TV. Some people just feel like they have a good feel for the writing, which is kind of where I'm at, and then other people think that kind of radio is their route. A lot of people who are in sports and radio, they want to do the broadcasting side, and that's kind of the avenue they go on. But a lot of guys I know who are broadcasters have to write post-game raps for
Mhm.
their team, so they're ending up doing as much writing probably as I do. So you have to kind of have all those skills, because it's going to work better for you. There'll be more opportunities if you do.
Yeah. Okay. How is over the years or throughout your career, how has the job kind of evolved, like with social media, with podcasts? Seems to be like sports is coming at being delivered like the news in many different ways all the time.
Oh yeah, man. There's so many different avenues to get your work out there, or to get to find stories, or just do anything. Yeah, there's so much more now. Even like, yeah, posting stories on Facebook is the biggest way that we get people to read them.
Hmm.
And when I started, like, that wasn't even a thing. No one
Yeah.
did that. We didn't know to do that. And like Twitter was just starting, and it wasn't really that big when I got going. And so yeah, now like I'm on Twitter every day reading stories from whether it's the Athletic or Toronto Star or Calgary Sun, whatever it is. I'm reading to try and find inspiration for stories, or to get better at my job. Right, like the more I read, the more I kind of understand how to do this, I guess, or get a little sense of what works and what doesn't. And so
Hmm.
that's using social media is essential. Like, you got to be on there kind of all the time.
Yeah.
It's it's hard. Honestly, you almost never switch it off, because I'm just looking at like what's going on and what people are talking about and what I could turn into a story for my own paper.
Yeah. And you never really know when things are going to come up and
Yeah,
happen.
like, well, the NHL stuff on the weekend, right? It's like all of a sudden there might be a season now, and when
Yeah.
2 weeks ago it was like, probably not, and now it's full kind of force ahead. It just
Yeah.
flips on a dime.
Yeah. Is there anybody like throughout your journalist career and when you are reading other writers, is there anyone that you kind of gravitate to towards their articles?
Oh yeah, Bruce Arthur for the Toronto Star. He's kind of like more of an opinion guy, but
Yeah.
his work has kind of always been my favorite stuff to read. John Branch is a writer for the New York Times. He wrote a book about Derek Boogaard. So I got to interview him when I lived in Melfort, because Derek Boogaard was from Melfort, and it was just before the book came out. So, but he just writes incredible stories about, like, but he writes about different sports. Like, he's written about the Rubiks Cube championships in the States, and
Really?
yeah, he's written about like the top mountain climbers in the world, and about climbing Mount Everest and all these. Like, he's written a lot about rodeo, and he just has a way of writing that it just like kind of pulls you in. So those two guys are like good hockey guys. I mean, Eric Datchuk, who writes for the Athletic, like, he's really
Hmm.
good. He just finds angles to stories that when you read, you're like, wow, like that drew me in. So
Yeah.
that's another thing I think around here that I like as well.
Right on. Yeah, that would be. Do you think is it harder to write about other sports? Like, is there a sport that you find writing about is easier than others? Like, I just think, like, what would you write about a Rubik's Cube championship?
Yeah, so I think hockey is obviously the thing that I've played, and I've been on the ice and I've been in the rooms. So I feel like I can get to the meat of the story a little bit better, because I
Hmm.
kind of understand how it works. But I think, as anything, you got to find the story. Like, you got to talk to the people who are involved and find out what makes them tick. And that's the story, right? So I think anything you don't know about, you talk to someone who's involved and you find out why they do what they do, or how they do what they do, and what goes into it. And then that kind of becomes the nugget for how you tell the story. And I think, yeah, so that's for rodeo. Like, I grew up in Ontario, rodeo wasn't a thing. But when I lived in Fort St. John, it's like, okay, there's a huge rodeo, go cover it. Like,
Yeah.
and I had no idea what I was doing, and I just started kind of talking to the guys who were involved about how they do it, and asked a bunch of stupid questions that they probably looked at me like I was an idiot. And yeah, and then just kind of learned from there. And the more you talk to people, and that community in particular is so welcoming and so nice about kind of what's going on. And then, yeah, they had a high school circuit up there too, and I covered a lot of that and talked to a lot of like younger kids about why they started. And yeah, that just becomes kind of the basis for how you build a story. Is you just find someone who's got an interesting like nugget, I guess, or like an interesting approach to what they're doing, and
Mm-hmm.
you build the story from there. You add some information in, and it writes itself, I guess.
Yeah, right on. So with that, like, how important is it in your job then to kind of build trust and relationships with the people that you're interviewing, like in Red Deer, be it the players on the Rebels or the coaches or the members of whatever the sport is that you're reporting on? How important is it to just build trust and relationships with those guys?
Oh, it's huge. Like they don't, if they don't trust you to be honest about what you're telling in your story, then you're never going to get another interview.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think for the Rebels, I've even found from my first year reporting to now, the guys are more comfortable because I'm around every day and they've seen me around and they kind of know a little bit about who I am and kind of what I do. So I found even that's broken down some barriers from my first year to now. But yeah, like even with coaches, it's the same thing. Like if I'm twisting their words or trashing their team all the time, like they're not going to want to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with some of the minor hockey coaches, and it helps so much because if I didn't go to a game because I was at something else, I can give them a call and they'll give me a wrap of what happened, and then it becomes an easy way to get it in. But if I didn't have that trust, then I'd never get that, right?
Yeah. And is that like when you first come to Red Deer and you start that job, is that something that right away you kind of work on and go and seek those relationships with guys?
Yeah, I work on it every day. Like all the time I'm here, I'm trying to do that. Whenever I go to a sporting event, like I'm trying to do that because I know how much it matters. Even if it doesn't matter for that story or that moment,
Mm-hmm.
it'll pay off down the road at some point. When I started here, the old sports reporter introduced me to a lot of people that I kind of needed to know, and he vouched for me in a way, and that helped get trust at the beginning. And then from then on, it's been up to me just to, like, I don't know, just honestly report on stuff and show up. If you show up, I find it's huge. Like,
Yeah.
especially those things that aren't the Rebels. If you're there and they see you're there, they care about getting stuff to you, or they care about giving back in that relationship a little bit. So I think that's an underrated part of the job for sure
Yeah.
as well.
Right on. I think just throughout like the ebbs and flows of a hockey season, there's got to be times where it's maybe sometimes awkward for you to go down and talk to coaches, or it's tough. Have you ever had any of those interactions or stories with players or coaches that it's been a tough interview?
I mean, anytime Brent Sutter loses,
That was kind of what I was hoping you'd get at.
like so after every road game, I give him a call just to kind of get his thoughts on the game. And yeah, it's tough when they lose. Like if they lose 6-0 or it's a 5-1 game on the road, it's not fun having to make that call. And I remember when I first started, I just was like crapping my pants
Yeah.
trying to make the call because he's an intimidating guy. But once I've gotten to know him like over the years, it's a bit easier to make the call because he knows that I have to do what I do, and he knows that maybe I'm going to ask a dumb question, but it's because I have to, and he gets it in that
Yeah.
way. But yeah, it's still not fun to make the call when they lose, that's for sure.
Yeah, I remember seeing you down there after the Raiders beat them out in the playoffs that year, and I just thought, oh man, that would not be an interview that I would want to be going to do. Like that's got to be one of the tougher parts of the job for sure, I would think.
Oh yeah, losses, like teams dealing with losses. But I've got some of the most honest answers from teams that have lost too, or coaches that have lost, and just like being able to reach deep down and like say what happened or say where things went wrong. So as much as I love doing like winners interviews
Mm-hmm.
because they're fun and people are happy, sometimes people get to a good place and are able to just really honestly reflect about what happened, and that's sometimes you get really good stuff. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what I'm looking for, is just for them to be honest and reflect on what happened, and see if I saw it the same way they did, or if they saw it a different way, then great too.
Hmm. Then, like when you're planning or preparing for interviews, are your questions typically the same, or how do you come up with those?
I think I'm different than a lot of people is I don't write too many questions down. Like I find if I have a list of questions, then I just get stuck on what I've written down and don't listen. And it's just huge to listen to what people have to say, and then kind of if something comes up as they're talking, you're like, oh, that's interesting, need to ask more about that, then you kind of write it down as you go. But I like to, yeah, just kind of make it more organic and just listen and build off what they're saying, and go that way. But I still like I do some research and I'll just write some notes about things, because I don't know, sometimes you get a kid or you get a person who's not really forthcoming and shares a lot, so you get like a 10-second answer, and you've got to have something to fill the time or fill the article, so you got to keep asking questions until you get a good answer.
Did you get a lot of those from Brent in the beginning?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it was tough in the beginning, and the nice thing about Postgame is it's a scrum, right? So other people are asking questions, so you kind of just can get in and get out of there without asking
Yeah.
something,
That's fine.
which is helpful. But yeah, when I have to call them on my own, I'd write the first time. I think I wrote like 10 questions down about things I saw in the game, and I asked, and then I learned to ask him too. Just what did you think of the game as my first question, and then he tries to cover off everything he thinks you're going to ask about in one answer, and so then you just kind of check things off as he goes past, and then
Yeah.
if you've got anything else that you need him to fill out, then you keep going.
Right on. Is there like throughout your career again, is there like any interviews or stories that you've done that stand out as memorable for either good or bad reasons?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. Like, I've just written so much that it's like, it gets overwhelming when you try and reflect that way. But the Canada Winter Games last year, I think a couple things that stood out to me, that I just remember a lot was Team Nunavut won their first ever game at the Canada
Hmm.
Winter Games, and just talking to some of those kids about like where they started playing hockey, and they didn't have access to rinks or gear or anything, or they had to travel 8 hours to get to a game, just one game or one practice or whatever it is. And then the next day after they won, some people were talking about kids in Nunavut who were pretending to be the kids that won at the tournament, like playing
Really?
road hockey. And I got to write about that. I was there at the rink, and like that to me was so cool.
Yeah.
That same tournament too, the Alberta female team won gold, and I'd interviewed the coach earlier on in the tournament, and then just being on the ice when they won, and just like how proud she was and how proud some of the girls were, was yeah, that was awesome. Like that, those moments when you're kind of a part of it, and they're just like they're so invested in the emotion that they want to just share with you kind of what the journey was like, is
Mhm.
yeah, is awesome. There's nothing better for me than doing that.
Yeah, that is cool. How many articles would you say you've done in your career?
I don't know, man.
Hundreds?
That's a good question. Like, at least since I've been in Red Deer, it's probably two a day for 3.5 years. So that's,
Wow.
I mean, yeah, like over 1,000, probably close to 2,000. Like, I think I've covered. I was trying to do the math last year, and I think I've covered close to like three 300 Rebels games.
Holy smokes.
So, and then I do a feature every week since I've started about the Rebels. So that's one story. So yeah, a lot, man. Like probably 2,000. That'd be a guess, but that's
That's
probably,
crazy.
yeah.
Is there anyone like when you watch like games on TV, or do you watch a lot of the post game conferences and the interviews and scrums that go on there?
Yeah, I watch a little bit, just more to see which guys are like are share like to share, and which guys are kind of dicks about it, more or
Yeah.
less. And they're, yeah, I think in any job anywhere, there's going to be people who are nice about things. There's going to be people who are jerks. Like it's
Yeah.
just how life kind of works. So yeah, I tune in a little bit, but I think those post games are so hard. Like everyone's like jonesing for an angle, especially in the playoffs.
Hmm.
And there's so many guys that are covering it and so many guys that are on it. Like everyone's just looking for their own little angle. And guys after the game just don't want to talk about that, especially if they've lost. Like the last thing they want to do is sit up there and answer 100 questions where 80 of them are the same or whatever. So
Yeah.
I think that's not the most valuable place to do it. And I find when I read articles, I can get a sense of what they asked anyways. Like just from the quotes that are in the story, I'm like, okay, they probably asked that in this way. Or
Yeah.
yeah, it's just yeah, the post game interview is not my favorite thing. I just like everyone's mind's running a million miles a minute, and they're maybe not formulating the best or not just really deeply thinking about what's going on. Whereas if you get a player one on one in the locker room or whatever it is, then you get a lot more forthcoming, I find, and they're a lot more at ease, and they're just a lot more expansive too with their answers. So I think that for me is always a better place where you get to get better stuff.
Yeah. Do you find like when you're watching sports or reading articles that it's hard to kind of just be a fan now because it's your job?
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
I'm always thinking about the story. Like
Mm.
whenever I watch a game, or yeah, I'm thinking, what would this guy say about that, or how would I write that, or yeah, anytime I watch, I can't turn it off. Like, well, like watching the Super Bowl, or like, and then I'll go to read. Like if I watch a sport, one of my favorite things is to wait until the stories go up and see if they would have picked the same moment in the game that I thought was most interesting and like formulated their story around that. Or if they picked a completely different moment and I was way off, and then that's cool too, kind of to
Yeah.
do that. But yeah, it's never turning it off when I'm watching sports, which is good and bad. Like I guess pro golf is probably the one thing I can watch and not really think too much about that. But like I was at the U.S. Open last summer, and I'm sitting there like trying to think of what would be the best story to tell. Like, and so yeah, it's just never turn it off, which
Yeah.
is good and bad.
How have things been in the last couple of months with obviously no sports going on?
Yeah, it's been hard. We've cut back hours a bit at work, and I've just kind of had to dive in to do a bit of news stuff, which again, I think reporting on news at the end of the day is the same as sports. Like you find a nugget that's interesting from someone who's involved in it, and you formulate a story around that. So it's very similar. So you just have to get used to the grind and the people who are involved in it. I think that's probably the hardest part is when I have a story idea about news, I don't know who to call. Like with
Hmm.
hockey, it's like, or with sports, it's like, okay, this happened, know exactly who to call, and I can get it done. Whereas it's a lot more like, okay, do I call this person, or who's like what's the kind of the process here? But yeah, sports wise, I don't know. For the first month, like I had a lot of stuff to write about. Like there's a lot of announcements, or there's athletes who'd finished their season, or were looking forward to a season, or had a season cut short. And there was a lot of those really like raw and emotional stories about people considering how this is going to affect them, right? So for the first month or month and a half, it was really, there's a lot of good stories I got to tell. And then yeah, over the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, it's kind of like, okay, that stuff's all been told more or less. It's like, are we going to play or are we not going to
Yeah.
play stories? And that's kind of been the main thing over the last, I'd say, 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, I found that too. Like month of April, like there was still it seemed to be like lots of stuff happening and lots of stories were out. And yeah, the last couple of weeks it's just like quiet, nothing.
Yeah, well, it's because everyone's kind of waiting, right, to
Yeah.
just see what happens, to see if things are going to come back. I think like minor hockey's the big thing where everyone's wondering like, how are we going to do this? And I think people are worried. Frankly, it's like, okay, there's a lot of contact in hockey, like person to person. You're face to face a lot of times, and like the dressing room is just like
Hmm.
a viral load waiting to happen. It's just like so how are you going to kind of manage all that stuff, right? So I think and it's so big in our community and our world that we live in. Like everyone wants to know what's going to happen.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Myself included.
Yeah. Okay.
What's the most exciting sports stuff going on in Red Deer? Obviously now it's a little bit different, but like, is there any minor hockey group or youth sports that's really up and coming and exciting there?
Well, next year we're going to have Junior A in Blackfalds, which be big for the area. They've wanted a team here for a long time, and there's a team in Olds, I guess, as well. But for most people, I think having a new team and kind of a new start will be cool. And it'll be interesting to see how people jump on board with that. And next summer, yeah, they're getting so the Blackfalds, I think, is 21-22 when they start playing. But they're also getting WCBL, Western Canadian Baseball Team, in Sylvan Lake. So they're building it's like what they have in Okotoks.
Yeah.
So they're building a brand new stadium.
Really?
Yeah, so that should be really cool next summer when that gets going and the stadium's built. And yeah, so that'll be really fun. I think a lot of people are looking forward to that. But the Bantam AAA team, the Red Deer Rebels, I mean, they always have a lot of guys drafted in the dub draft, and I think they'll be really good again next year. So that's kind of a team that I always follow just to see how their season goes. They usually put together a 5 or 10 game win streak at one point. Yeah,
they're always good. I got that whole Red Deer minor hockey. I think Dallas Guam's done such a good job as the president there and building such a good program for everybody. It's fun to watch those guys.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the midget AAAs, because Doug Quinn, who owns that Blackfalds team, isn't coaching. He's been coaching them forever, the midget AAAs. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that group. And Cody Reynolds is a really good guy, and he's done a lot of good work with RDC with their hockey program. So I look forward to seeing how he builds a team and how they play differently from what Doug Quinn was able to do. So yeah, that'll be interesting for me if and when hockey gets going.
Yeah, who's a tougher interview, Doug or Brent?
Oh, Doug, for sure.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I know him now a bit more, so I think he knows again what I'm kind of looking for, so he's able to give me a bit. But yeah, after games, he does not like to share very much. No, so he's definitely tough. And Brent just, I think, gets it and tells me kind of what I need to know. And yeah, Doug's a little bit tougher to pull things out of for sure.
So with those two teams going into Blackfalds and Sylvan Lake, you'll still cover them there as well?
Yeah, I think so. To me, as much as I can, like the Rebels obviously priority in the winter. So to get to a Junior A game on a Saturday night, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So the Sylvan in baseball in the summer, definitely going to be there as much as I can, because I love baseball. So if I can cover a baseball game, then I'd definitely be there. But we'll see how it works out. That I think the start of the year, the Blackfalds team, like I'll have to cover a little bit just to be like, hey, it's a new thing, inaugural season. So I'll definitely have to do some work with that. But as the season goes on, I've got to be at Rebels games, because that's what people are reading most. Like they draw 3,000 people every night. So you presume an audience of double that at least, right? That want to know what happened in the game or how things went. So
when you go to those games, are you there for the entirety of the game?
For Rebels I am. It depends for other sports. Like if it's a senior AA game that I maybe can't get to the whole thing, then it is what it is. But for the Rebels, for the most part. Well, that's another thing that we were talking before about how the job has kind of progressed. And when I started, it was like, okay, you could put a story up the next morning about the game and it'd be fine. But now I've got to have it on Facebook and Twitter by 10:30 or it's bunk. Like it's just so you got to get it up kind of right away or it's gone. People aren't paying attention by the next morning. So
that's interesting. Yeah, people want to know right away what's going on.
Yeah, especially if something happens. Like a lot of the NHL teams, like people who follow the NHL teams, want to know how prospects did in a certain game. So they're looking at that to see if anything happened to them. Like I think back to when Alex Alexiev got hurt, and he was on the radar as the first round pick. Like everyone was like, "Oh, what happened? Like, what's his status? Is he going to be back?" And then he was a Capitals pick, and then he got hurt again, and everyone's like, "Oh, is he going to be back? Is he injury prone? Is all this, like, what's the situation?" So I think that creates a lot of interest. So yeah, if you're not getting it up right away, then people aren't coming to you for what's going on.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's all I really had to chat about. I think it's something I've always been interested in that side of work. I think when I was a kid, it was something I wanted to do when I was done. So I've always, just been really interested in the sports media world and following it. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat there.
Yeah, man. I mean, it was when I was 18, it was like, are you going to play hockey anymore? Are you going to try and stay involved in some other way? And I tried coaching and I wasn't very good at that. So this was basically the only other thing I could do to stay involved in sports. And so yeah, that was kind of my path. But I always like talking about it because I think it's a thing where the more people understand what I'm trying to do and the way I approach it, I think it makes it easier, and they kind of understand that I'm not out to get them, or I'm not out to sewer them. I'm just trying to tell a good story, and that's all I'm looking for when I'm asking questions. I'm not trying to, sewer them or send them.
Yeah, and that's probably the first thing everybody thinks initially is going to happen, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and they put up kind of a wall, right? And then it makes it hard for me to do. And I think, like building that trust is the only way to fix that, and just do stuff like this where it's they can see I'm a real person that likes hockey or likes sports, and that's really where it starts and ends. Like that's what I'm trying to do, like shed a positive light on whatever's going on in sports, and or if I have to write about something negative that happened, then that's kind of the job. Like it's just the way it goes.
Yeah, no, exactly. All right on, man. I really appreciate it. That was awesome.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, talk to you later. Take care.
Yeah, sounds good. Have a good one.
You too.